What positives can we take away from the first 3 games for the New York Jets? Are our star players as good as we think they are? Why did they trade for a corner when they drafted one in the third round? And 4 other topics, so 7 in total in this one. I just picked some comments over my videos of the last few days. Not always the best at responding to comments, but I do read them all, and I do get a lot of video ideas from the comments, so I appreciate you guys who do cut it up in the chat. Number 1 is trading for another corner. This is in regards to the Jets bringing in Jarvis Brownlee Jr., JBJ. We have another, so we went from JBC to JBJ. Love to see it. Why not wide receiver or edge rusher? Also, why doesn't the staff want to play AZ Thomas? So here is my theory on the Jets bringing in JBJ, who is a super fun watch. Like, he's a psychopath, man. That dude plays corner like a linebacker. Now, why was he available? Well, number one, he is injured right now, so I don't know when he's going to be able to play for the Jets. Obviously, he'll have to pass a physical and all of that. But he has 11 penalties in like less than 20 career games. So that's crazy, crazy high. So obviously, if he can't cut that down, he cannot start for you. So that's part of it. But my theory on this is very simple. I think that JBJ is going to be a slot corner for the Jets. And the Jets suffered multiple linebacker injuries. They lost their starting linebacker in Quincy Williams, and they lost their primary backup linebacker, their third linebacker, in Marcelino McCrary Ball, both for the next 4 games at least. So my thinking is the Jets, with how depleted their linebacker room is, are probably going to play a lot more nickel than standard 4-3, kind of scrap the 4-3 because we just don't have the linebackers to justify playing a third. You're kind of concerned about even that second linebacker right now. And they don't think that Michael Carter II can be relied upon for that increased workload, both due to health and due to performance. So to me, and this is just straight up my opinion, I could be completely wrong. I don't see this as related to AZ Thomas or even Brandon Stevens or Sauce Gardner or any of that. I think this dude is coming in to maybe platoon with Michael Carter II because they're going to play a lot more nickel when they're so thin at linebacker. And furthermore, Michael Carter has got no guaranteed money after this year. And it's unfortunate. You know, with Stevens, we can rant and it's a bad signing, all this. Sauce is going to be nitpicked now because he's a $30 million corner, so the expectations are higher. But with Michael Carter, it's just a bummer. You know, I can't really fault the previous front office for extending him because he was earned. He wasn't a one-hit wonder. He was a plus starter as a rookie. Then the next 2 years, he was one of the top 5 players at his position. He was durable. He was consistent. You pay him what the market bears, and then bam, that next training camp, he gets injured. It's not even a thing where, oh, he got paid and he doesn't care anymore. His back got jacked up. And he's like a 190-pound dude who's he's hitting and tackling guys who are a lot bigger and heavier than him. And now his back is kind of jacked up, and I don't think he's returned to form. It's been a while since Michael Carter has been a good football player, and that is just unfortunate. So right now, if you had to tell me, if I had to guess, I don't think Michael Carter is going to be rostered on this team for 10, 11 million bucks next year when they can get out of it and with almost, little money wasted. So you have to have that nickel spot maybe solved for the future. So I think he kind of helps you in the immediate, in the future. And maybe I'm completely wrong, and he's a boundary corner or a safety or whatever they want to do. Again, that's just my guess that he's going to be a nickel player. And on that trade, dude, I love these type of moves. They're such no brainers, right? And with Joe Douglas, Joe Douglas did a lot of this on the selling end of it, where you're not going to use a player, you have no use for them, so you get what you can, right? You trade away Chris Herndon, you trade away Denzel Mims for whatever anybody will give you, like Moogie already did with, was it Derek Nottie, right? It's basically free money, whatever it is. You see a dollar on the floor, you pick it up, cool. But now tapping into it on the buying end, like, to me, if you can get a player who has demonstrated that they are an NFL player in any capacity, they are an NFL player that is worth a 6th, 7th round pick swap. It's not even a draft pick you're giving up. You're sliding back like whatever it's going to end up being, maybe 25 spots in the very back end of the draft where you're getting towards like UDFA grades on those players. So yeah, man, like Jawan Briggs, yeah, he's going to be better than 90% of 6th, 7th round picks. This kid, JBJ, he was a starter on a very bad team, maybe the worst team in the NFL. But like, okay, even if he could be a backup and a special teamer, that is just better return on investment than the vast majority of seventh round picks, and not just Jets seventh round picks. Like even good GMs, once you get to the seventh round, it's unlikely that that player has an NFL career, much of anything once you get to round 7. So I like these moves. I don't think it's an indictment on AZ Thomas personally. I don't even think it's an indictment on Brandon Stevens. I think they're going to run more nickel because their linebackers are all hurt. Now, in terms of wide receiver or edge rusher, yeah, I hear you, man. That's a little bit of that defensive minded coach, man. We're out there starving with Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson drops another pass, man. We're going to trade for an 8th corner next week. I'll say this. I made a video right before the season started on a potential trade in Azeez Ojulari from the Eagles, and I still think it's worth a call. He is getting healthy scratched by the Eagles because they have Uche, who's pretty much the same role, which is strictly third down only pass rusher. With Ojulari, he is smaller than Will McDonald, so there's some limitations there. It's not the best fit. They really needed like a Jadeveon Clowney kind of type, but whatever, those options are gone. But he does have, the dude has 23 career sacks in 46 games. And that's probably more than like all of the Jets edge rushers combined who played against the Buccaneers. And let's not lose sight of the bar. Like it's not a perfect fit stylistically, but dude, he's an NFL player. He's an NFL player. And the Jets are currently without Jermaine Johnson playing. I don't know if he's going to be available for Monday, but the Jets are currently playing multiple edge rushers who are bluntly not NFL players. So I would call up Philly, and he is 25 years old. Now, unlike JBJ, who has 3 more years of rookie control, it's almost like a draft pick. That's why it's not even like, oh, you're buying. It's not like a buying all-in type of moves. It's like, no, it's you're adding another draft pick, another rookie almost, in guys like Briggs and JBJ. Now, with Ojulari, it's like vet minimum money for the rest of this year, but he is 25, so it could be one of those players that you could resign next year and he could play a role for you because edge is probably going to be a need, on the team next year, even if JJ comes back healthy. The depth at edge still needs to be improved. All right, that was a lot on that first one. Let's get to number 2. Don't think our top flight players are as good as we think they are. Garrett Wilson is a very good number 2 receiver. We'll get to it. Olu has not looked like a bookend tackle, and Will McDonald is another Bryce Huff. Breece Hall is the most overrated Jet. I mean, I can no longer pretend that Breece Hall is going to be the running back that we envisioned when we drafted him and after his start to his rookie year. To be honest, man, it's a bummer. He's got a lot of potential. He's got a lot of talent. I think he'll have big games. I still think they can get him more involved in the passing game, but I think if the Jets are going to be sellers at deadline, that's a player they might look to move. So I'll meet you in the middle there on Breece. I can't look you in the eye and tell you he's a top 10 running back. He's just not. So on some weeks, he's not the best running back on the team, depending on the matchup and depending on how he looks. I thought Braylon Allen in the second half ran a lot harder and was just better against Tampa Bay. But obviously the ceiling, like Breece week 1, that ceiling is way higher than Allen and Davis. But yeah, man, he's just not consistent enough individually, even given the context and the blocking individually, he's just not an excellent back right now. Now, on Garrett Wilson, I would definitely disagree. Now, wherever you want to rank him, is he a top, 15 receiver? Like, I don't think he's clearly not like at that all pro level, that very top tier, like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, or even, even like a guy like Neighbors. Like, I think Neighbors, just with the size he has, you could probably rank a guy like that ahead of Garrett Wilson, for being honest. If that puts me in Jet fan, prison, so be it. But he's a number 1. Garrett Wilson is a number 1 receiver, no doubt about it. He is a number 1 who warrants a very high target share in an offense. He'd be a number 1 on a lot of other teams. He'd be a number 1 on some good teams. I think like the Ravens and the Chiefs are 2 teams that, I know they're struggling right now, but they're 2 of the better teams in the conference. And I think and the Bills, like he'd be the best receiver on the Bills, who are probably might be the best team in the NFL right now. So I think he's a number 1. He's a number 1. He's not perfect, but he's a number 1. Would he have 10 catches on 14 targets against the Bucs from a backup QB? And He's man, the QBs he's played with, not only bad QBs, but so many different quarterbacks that he's caught passes from. So he's a number one receiver to me. Now let's get to Olu and Will McDonald. And I understand what you're saying because number one, and let's remember these guys are both still young, especially Olu, who had a young draft age. And remember he was injured at the end of last year. He was on the bench at the beginning. Then in the middle, he played right tackle and guard. So Olu Fashanu has like less than a dozen starts at left tackle in his career. He's 22 years old. So let's wait a hot second on Olu. Now, I understand because the Jets right now, their roster, like 15 to 25, is 15 to 30, like that middle chunk of their roster is so bad. They got some players, man. It's not like the 2019 roster where it's just nobody and their best players like Jordan Jenkins or whatever and Henry Anderson. They got some players, but that drop off, there's just no role players. It just goes right to fringe roster, practice squad talent pretty quickly. So those guys who do have the talent to be elite, you really want them to be top-notch players right away. Guys who are taken in the top 15. And that's a fair expectation. Top 15 pick, you want a great player. With Will, now you're saying he's another Bryce Huff. I think he's definitely more talented than Bryce Huff and the length and just a more gifted pass rusher. And he's more system versatile than Bryce Huff, who has to be in a wide nine to be functional. But with Will, okay, did you notice how against the Steelers, when the game was competitive throughout all four quarters, he was arguably the best player on the field? But then when you play games where, in the Bucks game, it wasn't really a close game. The touchdown to Garrett Wilson to cut it to a one score was just cut it down. It almost felt like a garbage time touchdown, right? And then they blocked the kick and a bunch of stuff happened and it was an almost. But the reality is the last 8 quarters, 7 of them, the Jets have been uncompetitive. And it felt like the game was over in the second quarter against the Bucks. It felt like the game was over in the first 5 minutes against the Bills after the Fields fumble. So if you want to suck and be uncompetitive, then Will McDonald is not of good use to you. That's just what it is. If you want to allow the other team to be in their 4-minute offense, this like in the first quarter, then Will McDonald is of no use to you. And I know he's not a good run defender, but man, dude, you put a guy like that on like the Lions, where you can actually play in a downhill script in a climate that's conducive to his skill set, he'd have like freaking 15, 16 sacks, man. And he'd have his run PFF grade would be 49 and nobody would care. And he'd be getting strip sacks to close out games. So if you want Will McDonald to be of use to you, you have to try to not suck. And Olu, bro, you can't right now. He's in an offense where, like, okay, who's a good team? Like the Bills. Go put Olu on the Bills and give the Jets Dion Dawkins, and then we'll check their pressure numbers. Because when the other team is sending the same weak side blitz over and over again, and now you're trying to pass off a stunt and then go get this guy, and this guy's coming through you as the back, and you're just that one side is being so overwhelmed. And now Olu's lost some one-on-one matchups. Highsmith got him. Yaya Diaby beat him. Bosa got him. You're going to lose some reps. Membu's been better individually, I would say, than Olu so far. But it's like that's such a tough ass to the left side of their offensive line. When from a coaching perspective, quarterback perspective, weapons perspective, you're allowing the other team just to straight up jailbreak blitz you repeatedly, and your quarterbacks are holding the ball for the longest time in the NFL. The Jets have the longest time to throw in the NFL between Taylor and Fields combined. Your offensive line can't survive that. So that's just something to keep in perspective on those two players, particularly on Olu, because he is a lot younger and it is only like literally 10 starts at his position. I get what you're saying, but I hope that pushback makes a little bit of sense, man. Like we see guys leave and do really well, and those are two guys who, like, I'm telling you, you put them on some other teams and they're gonna be just fine. It'd be really good. So hopefully we can be that kind of team that is conducive to their success. Number 3, we should have kept DJ Reed. People are overreacting to the Stevens. Oh, okay, so this is 2 that I can combine together because they were both kind of around cornerback too. So one guy just says should have kept DJ Reed. I like the comments that are just like statements like that. Number 2 says people are overreacting to the Stevens signing. He wasn't a big ticket free agent. This isn't Tremaine Johnson. is not Tremaine Johnson. Now I know Tremaine Johnson, now you look at his money, it doesn't sound like much compared to this year's salary cap. But at the time, it was a ton of money. And Tremaine Johnson is what I would consider like a catastrophic signing. Truly was. Is Brandon Stevens getting 12 million in 2025 a catastrophic signing? It is not, but it is a very poor signing. And I know we like to reset the clock of we don't want to start whining and moaning after we just got done whining and moaning about the last guys. You don't want to be right down the new guy's throat. You like to give them that grace period. I get that, but let's also be fair. If Joe Douglas signed Brandon Stevens, I personally would be ripping him, right? Because it's similar to Alan Lazard, where it's like this guy is who you knew he was. You had a big sample size that this guy is bad, and you signed him for apparently no reason, thinking you could fix him. It hasn't worked so far. Obviously had a reason, but it's it doesn't seem like they had a good enough reason so far, right? And the bummer is it's 2 years, because if it was 1 year, it's like, whatever, you signed Dalvin Cook, he's washed, okay, whatever, 9 million, he's off your books. But now he's going to be on the books for 12 million next year, and if you didn't sign him, you could have gotten a 5th round pick comp pick back because it canceled out. So this was the offseason to where like you really wanted to maybe pull back unless you really needed to sign a guy, because you could have got that. So basically you sign him to 2 years, 25 million in terms of the guarantees, and a 5th round pick. Like those things compound, right? And I think also the thing with Stevens is this wasn't an offseason where the Jets signed. What was that one offseason where they signed like Laken Tomlinson and Conklin and Uzama and Jordan Whitehead? And I think it was one other. It was like 5 guys who were making 8-10 million up to 15 million. It wasn't that. So he was really the biggest position player addition from another team, right? Because Fields, you got your quarterback. Sherwood, you brought him back. But their first guy, like, I want to go get me Brandon Stevens. So it's going to magnify it more when it was kind of a frugal offseason otherwise. So yeah, not catastrophic, but definitely a poor signing for sure. Because now you're looking at next year, you're going to try to move him to safety to salvage some value, or is he going to be on your bench? Because next year I think A.Z. Thomas and Sauce Gardner should be your boundary corners, and figure it out from there. I think maybe you could put Stevens at safety and then put this kid JBJ at nickel, and then you cut Michael Carter. Maybe that's just the best way, and then you let Cisco walk, and you have Malachi Moore and Brandon Stevens as your safeties. A.Z. Thomas and Sauce at boundary corner, and JBJ at nickel. That's not exactly the Legion of Boom, but just trying to manage the resources and investments you've made. Maybe that's the way they do it. Now, in terms of DJ Reed, yeah, DJ Reed is obviously better than Brandon Stevens, but bro, like, guys have a say in if they sign here. DJ Reed told a Bills reporter week 15 of last year that he was looking forward to free agency. That was before Glenn and Muji were hired. Like, he was gone. Maybe you could say Brandon Eccles. Maybe he could have been back. I would have liked him back. But DJ Reed made up, like, guys like DJ Reed, Devontae Adams, like, those guys were gone. Devontae Adams, you could see his face on the sideline by Halloween, man. He had his eyes on California. Like, those guys were gone. So it is what it is. It's not like you got rid of him. He didn't want to be here anymore. Number 4, what are some positives to take away from these coaches? Not just that we played close games. What are tangible things to give us hope? So, I mean, from a personnel perspective, like, yeah, looks like Membu looks like a hit. Quinnen looks like he's back in all pro form. But I think big picture wise, the most optimistic takeaway I have so far is that if you're looking at the Jets most likely drafting a quarterback next year, maybe they don't, but I think that is a very likely circumstance that they draft a quarterback in the first round next year. And what are the 2 most important things that a quarterback needs, in my opinion, to be functional? Is offensive line and your offensive coordinator are the 2 most important. You also need, like, weapons and overall head coaching of competent, stable organization, all that stuff. But really, if you look at some of the things that failed our previous quarterbacks, like, man, like look at the offensive lines. Like, Zach Wilson would kill for this offensive line we had this year, even last year. Look at the offensive lines that were in front of Zach. A lot of it due to injuries. And then he had Michael Flohr, who was okay, not great. And then Nate Hackett. And also maybe Zach just kind of sucked, but the Jets didn't check both those boxes with Zach Wilson. They just didn't. they most certainly did not check it with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold had a bottom 3 offensive line and a bottom 3 like coaching staff his entire career with the Jets. And now he goes to Seattle, he's Minnesota, Seattle, he's successful. So with the offensive line, I do think there's some stuff to work with there. It's not the Eagles, but I think it meets the offensive line talent they just have right now, and particularly in their pass protection. It meets the minimum threshold to where you're looking at drafting a new quarterback, they would have a fighting chance behind that offensive line. And the play caller, Tanner Engstrand, I think he's shown some chops. Like there's been a lot of meat left on the bone, just from the talent on the roster, like the quarterback, not so much accuracy, but just decision making. Garrett Wilson, and that's something that we stressed about over the offseason. Like, oh, teams are gonna key on Garrett Wilson. They're gonna put 3 guys on him. And look, Garrett Wilson's been open a lot. Tanner Engstrand has done a really good job of leveraging his number 1 receiver and scheming him to be open and to be the first read and to have the offense run through him. Tanner Engstrand has done a really good job at that. There's one thing you want to take away, and Garrett Wilson should have 400 yards this year if he had some quarterbacks that could be more decisive. And then just also the running backs had and the offensive line had a tough time against Tampa communicating against blitzes, which I guess kind of falls in the offensive coordinator too, but he's done a good job with that. Garrett has, because when you're heading into this year, you're like, Garrett's going to get a lot of yards, but is it going to be efficient, or is he just going to get so many targets that he has a lot of yards? But so far through 3 games, his yards per target and his catch percentage, catching 70% of his targets, and his yards per target would both be career highs. So far, Tanner Engstrand has been able to leverage Garrett Wilson in a way that's been more effective than the previous, what has it been, 3 play callers who've gotten a shot with Garrett. So there's your white pill. I think the biggest one for the year. Obviously, you would need another weapon. Like if you're looking at your drafting another quarterback, you get Tanner Engstrand, you have an offensive line, you have Garrett Wilson, and then you would need Mason Taylor to take a second-year leap, and then you need to go ahead and spend like your second-round pick on a receiver, and then all of a sudden you're going to find out if that quarterback can play. Because I think, I think that would be enough if Tanner Engstrand keeps showing that he's got some ability. Number 5. How is it Steve Wilks' fault that the players can't tackle? No scheme works if you can't tackle. Yeah, it does become a little bit of chicken or the egg here, because at the end of the day, like, was it Keith Carter's fault that the offensive lineman couldn't block right? I don't know. At the end of the day, you're kind of responsible for your unit. Now, there are extremes. Like if your quarterback is Tim Boyle and you have 5 Max Mitchells on your offensive line, yeah, no offensive coordinator is going to be successful there. But dude, you can't convince me that the Jets have not been at a coaching disadvantage throughout with their defense so far for 3 games. I'm sorry, they just have. They're 3rd worst in DVOA. They're 4th worst in EPA per play. And there's some talent deficiencies. There's some challenges, especially now losing Quincy. If Quincy and JJ can't go, that's tough. And Michael Carter not being good anymore is not his fault, but none of us went into the year saying we're going to be a bottom 5 defense, and that's fine. And that's part of what's frustrating when you start losing. I don't like the gaslighting of like, oh, well, we were everything was supposed to be bad. What do we expect? And now we'll see against the Dolphins, because there's a question about that in a minute. But it's like, bro, like, I don't know, like people will say like, oh, well, Dan, going off on a tangent, like Dan Campbell started 0-11. And it's like, dude, if we're 0-11, that is be very bad. If we're 0-11, I don't want to hear anyone telling me that the Chicago Nanny Hawks in 1914 started 0-48 and they won the Ryder Cup. I don't care, bro. You can't. I hate doing that. I hate when we start like we're in the beginning of the season. We're like, no, this is going to be good. We're going to surprise the people. And then if anyone were to say in the beginning of the year, we're going to have a bottom 3 defense, Jet fans would have eviscerated them. No, we're not, bro. JJ's back. Sauce is here. We got a veteran defensive staff. We got Sherwood. We took a couple of guys in the mid rounds. We spent like a gazillion dollars in the back 7 of our defense. Will McDonald, 3-year leap. Quinn is back. So if some ESPN talking head said, I think the Jets are going to be bottom 3 in defense, we all would have attacked them. And then all of a sudden they're bottom 3 in defense. And it's like, oh, well, what did you expect? Of course, this is going to, like, no, it's BS, man. I hate that. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah. So, but if the players are not playing fundamental football, it kind of is on the coach a little bit too. Like at the end of the day, you're culpable for your unit, right? And if Steve Wilks isn't good, that's on that's going to eventually be on Glenn to deal with. That's just how the chain of command works, in my opinion. Now, from a schematic perspective, I will give Wilks credit is that he did mix up his coverage. He went way more cover 2 and cover 4 against Baker, which is good because Baker shreds man. So he went away from the psychotic addiction to cover 1. He mixed it up a bit. Now they are still the only defense in the entire NFL who has not run one single snap of quarter half. And quarter half is the most commonly run disguised defense. Brian Flores runs it the most in the NFL, and the Vikings defense is number 1 in defensive EPA. It's the number 1 coverage that is correlated with defensive success in the NFL. Now, correlation, causation, I don't know, but that seems like a big coincidence. Brian Flores is doing it 22% of the time. Steve Wilks, 0. So I think that one of the biggest problems with the Jets defense is it's very predictable. Like even on that last play against the Bucks before the field goal, you knew they were running that double B gap linebacker blitz, and they were able to counter it with an easy tunnel screen. Whereas Flores will, it looks like cover 3, but it's actually quarter half, and it's man on one side and zone on the other. It looks like they're blitzing, but they back out. Like so stuff like that, which is, it should be pretty standard kind of parts of your defense, I think, for a veteran defensive staff. Maybe sprinkle some of those in, but I will give credit to Wilks because he did make changes. Like he did significant changes to the type of defenses they were running. And the defense was better than it was against the Bills and against the Steelers. They allowed what, if you take away the pick 6, that's not on them. So they allowed 22 points or whatever. That was better. So I'll give them credit there for sure. Number 6. This is the worst draft in a decade. Taking Mason Taylor and A.Z. Thomas when guys like Will Johnson and Harold Fannin Jr. were on the board was disgraceful. Now I know we don't think this is the worst draft class in a decade, but I just figured there was a comment about the draft class, so I'm like, all right, let's talk about the draft class. Now, first of all, you're speaking my language, dude. Will Johnson and Harold Fannin, the two big draft questions of mine, man. Pairing Will Johnson with Sauce. I love you, Mason Taylor, but I would do that over in a second. Now, worst draft class in a decade is insane because, dude, I mean, even in like last year, the Jets got Olu, cool. And then they got like some backup running backs and a gunner out of their whole draft class. Jordan Travis, Jalen Key out of the league, Malachi Corley fighting to stay in the league. So you got your left tackle who you're hoping develops into a bookend guy. And then you got running back depth and a gunner. Okay. The draft before that, you got McDonald, Tippmann, nice, and then nothing. So the last 2 drafts combined, you got 3 starters. And I think they're going to end up getting 3 starters out of this class: 1, 2, 3, Membu, Taylor, Thomas. Not necessarily 3 like all pros, but 3 starters. In my opinion, it's just my 2 cents. Malachi Moore and Arian Smith are probably going to end up being primary backup players. I do think there's some limitations in Malachi Moore's coverage ability, but he's very comfortable sniffing around line of scrimmage and being aggressive and run support. He's going to play on special teams, so I think he's just going to be a player in the league. Like maybe he's your third safety sub package guy. Can do some stuff where he's playing quasi linebacker so you can split the difference in your 4-3 and nickel looks, and be a core special teamer. And be in the league for 7-8 years. And is that the absolute end of the world for a 4th round pick? It's not. I think Arian Smith is going to end up being, probably like a wide receiver 4. And some of the people that said we should have taken this guy or that guy are probably going to end up being right. And then Kiko and Barron are probably going to be like fringe roster guys, maybe out of the league. And honestly, that is kind of a standard draft class. It's not a home run, but if you look at a lot of draft classes, even Jets draft classes, excluding ones where you have like 3 first-round picks in 2022, that's kind of better than most. I mean, the Jets haven't drafted a starter in round 3 since a multiple-year starter in round 3 since Jordan Jenkins. They haven't drafted a multiple-year starter in round 4 since Bilal Powell. So if AJ Thomas can be an average starting corner, he'll be their best third round pick in like a decade almost. You know what I mean? So worst draft class in a decade, I would highly push back on that. We also had a draft class in 2020 where it was like Denzel Mims, Ashton Davis, Jabari Zuniga, James Morgan, LaMichael Pirine. Like it was like 6 players who were out of the league in a year. So definitely not the worst in a decade. I definitely think that, day 3, like, did you need to trade up for more and trade up for Barron? Maybe not, because that was, you could have had those extra picks, maybe take some dart throws elsewhere. But I'm pretty bullish on day 1 and day 2, and I hope that Arian Smith can get some opportunities as some deep shots, man. Like, take advantage of that speed. He's not Deebo Samuel. You got to stretch the field with him. Okay, finally, I thought the Jets would win 6 games. None of them were the ones we've played so far. I'm not concerned at all. Yeah, I thought they would win 7, and I thought they'd start 1 and 2. So that's probably the difference in our prediction there. Yeah, well, I think we'll find out a lot about this team against Miami. Let's be honest, if they lose, and people are going to be posting the gifs of Glenn dancing on the sideline and making fun of him, and then saying this is how you feel when you're 0-4 or whatever, and posting their tankathon charts and screenshots. And what rebuttal will you have? If you lose to Miami, then you're pretty much the worst team in the AFC. You and the Titans are the worst teams in your conference through 4 games. And I think that when Aaron Glenn took over, I actually liked the Aaron Glenn answer of what is your expectation for this year when he said a team that you can be proud of. Because I don't think that's BS. I think we understand what that means. And we understand. And I think it's good that he didn't attach a win total to it, because he can't come out and say we're going to make the playoffs and then not, right? When he knows it's not a playoff team that he has. So I liked that answer. And if you lose to the Dolphins, then you're not a team that we can be proud of, right? Because right now, even at 0-3, there's a path where they can salvage this season and meet that criteria of a team you can be proud of. Because if you beat the Dolphins and you're like, hey, okay, you can beat bad teams. Guess what? You're going to play a lot of them coming up pretty soon here. And then you beat Miami and you're like, hey, you know what? You're facing the Cowboys without CeeDee Lamb at home, and they have a defense that's as bad as the Dolphins. And the Cowboys will probably be like a 1.5 point road favorite. Go beat them. And then you're 2-3. And you don't got to look any further than that. You're 2-3, and you're right in the muck of a bunch of other 2-3 teams, and you're having a normal season. If you lose to Miami, then you're wondering, like, bro, when does our first win come? If we can't beat Miami, can we beat Dallas? Can we beat the Panthers, who just blew out the Falcons by like 30 points? Are we going to be a 2-win team where now we don't even trust the infrastructure to bring in a new quarterback? Like, it's that this game is very significant it's a fork in the road, right? And now maybe they lose to Miami and then they win 4 in a row. Okay. Or maybe they beat Miami, of course, but let's be honest, man, in terms of, it's going to be a long week. Like, no, you're not going to want to be plugged into any Jets media or content if they lose to Miami, because people are going to be losing their minds. It's going to be brutal. So I really hope we can avoid that. Let's send Miami packing. Let's have them fire their coach and their GM after a win, because the Jets just have more to play for, not necessarily for playoffs or anything like that this year, but you're a new regime trying to establish yourself. And it felt like Miami's scrappy effort against Buffalo, that was them emptying the clip, the last bit they had with McDaniel and Greer. And now they're just asking to be put out of their misery. And if you're the Jets, you got to fly down there and put them out of their misery. You unequivocally have to win this game. There's no way around it. Got to win this game. And hopefully they do. And we'll talk all soon.